At an elite university where power decides truth, Jalen, a broke student working as the school's janitor, clings to his last hope, a scholarship tied to a brutal exam. But when the girl sitting beside him collapses, he rushes to her side and performs first aid to pull her back from the edge of danger. His reward? Expulsion, humiliation, erasure. Broken and powerless, he thinks it's over. What he doesn't know is that this single act of courage will ignite a war, expose a system, and change his destiny forever. Before we dive deeper into this story, let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to hype and subscribe for more heartwarming stories every day. At 5 a.m. Before most students even remembered they were alive, Jalen Cole was already on his knees scrubbing a marble floor so polished it nearly reflected his entire life back at him. The stone was cold, imported, absurdly expensive, and every swipe of his brush reminded him that the kids who'd walk over it in a few hours were born into worlds he'd never even been allowed to look at. His fingers were cracked from the industrial cleaner he mixed at 4 in the morning, a sting that had become familiar enough to feel like background noise. He worked the morning shift from 4 to 6, then slept in whatever corner campus security pretended not to notice, sometimes in the maintenance closet with a mop for company, then worked the night shift from 8 to 11. It was the only way he could stay enrolled without getting kicked out of the country of dreams he was trying to survive inside. The lobby around him was ridiculous: Italian marble, leather chairs that smelled like money, and a chandelier that dripped crystals in slow motion whenever the AC kicked on. A bronze statue of the university's founder stared down like a disappointed ancestor. Jalen pushed his trash cart across all of it, weaving between empty champagne bottles left from someone's overnight birthday party. There were sequins on the floor, a broken high heel, a $2,000 jacket someone forgot and probably wouldn't miss. He picked up a half-eaten pastry that cost more than his entire breakfast and tossed it into the bin, then pulled out the $1 bread he'd bought from a gas station. Balanced diet, he muttered to himself, biting into it. Luxury on luxury. Students were starting to drift in. Most didn't see him, truly see him. A couple of them gave him that half-glance people use for furniture that moved. One girl walked by in a silk robe over gym clothes, sipping an $18 custom latte, and tossed him a smile that somehow felt worse than being ignored. Behind her came one of the Crest Society guys, tall, blonde, surgically sculpted eyebrows. "Morning, janitor boy," he said, not slowing down. Jalen offered a little salute, playful but tired. "Always a pleasure, boss." The guy didn't even register it. The Crest Society, 7 students whose parents practically owned half the state, moved like royalty across campus. No one said it out loud, but everybody knew if you crossed them you didn't stay long. The school's scholarship system worked on a brutal 6-month renewal cycle, and somehow, suspiciously often, kids without money lost theirs after one bad semester or one bad rumor. Jalen didn't need anyone to explain the math to him. One slip, one reason for them to look his way, and the chain reaction would send him straight home to a collapsing family that couldn't afford even a single emergency. So he lived the way people in earthquakes live, always listening for cracks beneath the floor. But when it came to studying, he refused to give up. After finishing the morning cleaning of the lab building, he'd sometimes stand inside the empty rooms, memorizing everything on the whiteboards before wiping them down. He'd snap photos, rewrite the equations in his beat-up notebook, then delete the pictures in case anyone checked. He was a ghost student, learning from the smudges other people left behind. He had one spot in particular, an old lab desk by the window where no one except him ever sat. No one knew how that unspoken rule formed, but somehow the chair remained empty for him. Jalen would sit there after cleaning, breathing in that quiet 5 minutes before the building came to life, imagining he belonged to this world. Then one Thursday morning, Sophia Hartwell dropped her stack of papers right in front of him. The sound cracked through the hallway, and Jalen straightened up instantly, half out of surprise, half out of instinct. She crouched, rubbing her forehead, muttering something like, "Of course this would happen today," and he joined her, gathering papers that were neatly highlighted and absurdly organized. Up close she looked like every poster version of perfect American student: blonde hair pulled back, soft blue eyes, sweatshirt that looked inexpensive but definitely wasn't. But there was nothing showy about her. She took the bus. She dressed simple. She made room for people instead of walking through them. "Thanks," she said, brushing her hair behind her ear. "No problem," Jalen replied with an easy shrug. "Gravity's rude to everyone." She gave a short laugh, genuine, unexpected, and something shifted. After that morning she started choosing the desk near his. Not always, not in a way anyone would question, but often enough that he noticed, and every time she did, Jalen felt this strange warmth crawl up his chest, the kind he wasn't used to. Someone sitting near him, talking to him, treating him like he wasn't just part of the school's cleaning equipment. That night, long past midnight, when Jalen was scrubbing the lab sinks again, he felt a pair of eyes on him. He turned. Sophia stood outside the glass door watching him quietly, her expression soft in a way he couldn't read. Not pity, thank God, not pity. Something else, something heavier. She didn't knock, she didn't call out. She just stayed there for a moment, hands shoved in the pockets of her hoodie, as if trying to understand how someone could live in the same world as her but carry so much weight alone. Two people in two completely different worlds, yet both of them were somehow desperately, quietly lonely. And neither had any idea how violently those worlds were about to collide. The morning of the exam didn't feel normal, it felt like the whole campus was holding its breath. Jalen ran from the janitor's closet to the lecture hall with the smell of bleach still clinging to his sleeves, his heart pounding from a mix of exhaustion and adrenaline. This test wasn't just a grade for him, it was the gatekeeper of his entire life. Pass it and he survived another 6 months. Fail it, or even sneeze wrong and everything collapsed, his scholarship, his job, his housing, his family's last fragile thread of hope. As he slipped into the massive hall he could sense the static in the room, that eerie stillness right before something big happens. Students were scattered across rows of polished wooden desks, flipping through last-minute notes with trembling hands. Nobody talked, nobody even pretended to breathe normally. The Crest Society sat in the front row like they owned the air everyone else was trying to inhale, leaning back in their chairs with an arrogance that somehow made them louder than the silence. One of them, the tall blonde guy from the lobby, glanced over his shoulder at Jalen and smirked as if the exam had been written by his personal tutor, which technically it had. Jalen ignored him, or tried to. His mind was already spinning through formulas, steps, and the exact timing of everything. The exam clock was brutal, and the proctor was known for acting like she'd been hired to hunt down joy. She walked in right then, carrying a clipboard like it was a weapon, her heels clicking with military precision. She scanned the room with a face that suggested she was already disappointed in everyone. No talking, no standing, no eye contact after the test begins. She barked. Any violation results in immediate invalidation. And I do mean immediate. Jalen sat straighter, he'd cleaned her office before. He knew she wasn't exaggerating. He looked toward the back where Sophia usually sat near him, but today she wasn't there. She had taken a seat several rows away, close to the aisle, her posture stiff, as if she hadn't slept. She didn't look at him. And he didn't blame her, they weren't friends, not really. Whatever connection they had was quiet, fragile, unspoken. This was an exam that punished distractions, and he didn't want to be one for her. He inhaled slowly, fingers trembling just enough for him to notice. "All right," he whispered under his breath. "Nothing stupid today, just survive." The proctor raised her whistle, the entire room leaned forward, and for a moment Jalen felt something almost hopeful, maybe, just maybe, he had a shot. Then the whistle shrieked, the papers hit the desks, and the day started spinning toward a disaster no one saw coming. The exam had been running for barely 20 minutes when the room shifted in a way no one knew how to name. That kind of tension where one tiny sound suddenly sticks out like a flare in the night. Jalen was hunched over his paper, deep in a problem he'd practically memorized the path through, when he heard a sharp inhale from somewhere to his left, too sharp, too broken. At first he thought it was just someone panicking over question 3, but then a chair scraped back hard enough to echo across the hall and every head snapped up. Sophia was sitting rigid at her desk, fingers clawed around her pen like she couldn't let go even as her breath hitched in uneven bursts. Her face drained of color so fast it was like watching a candle snuff itself out. The pen slipped, then her elbow slid. And suddenly her entire body tipped sideways, crashing into the desk beside her with a thud so jarring the hall fell into complete, horrified silence. For a split second no one knew what they were supposed to do. Students froze mid-scribble, eyes wide, waiting for someone else to move first. The Crest Society glanced at one another, not out of concern, but out of calculation, like even this moment belonged to them somehow. Jalen's stomach dropped. Something was wrong, seriously wrong. He half stood out of instinct, but the proctor's voice cut through the air like a blade. Anyone who leaves their seat will have their exam voided. She snapped, already storming down the aisle. Remain seated, do not move. It was the kind of command that drilled into people, the kind that made them shrink instead of stand. And it worked. Everyone stayed frozen, eyes darting between their test papers and Sophia's unmoving body on the floor, as if they were being forced to choose which reality they were allowed to look at. Sophia wasn't moving, nothing but a shallow rise in her chest. A few students looked shaken, but not enough to risk their academic lifeline. The room fell into a suffocating stillness. Jalen could feel his pulse hammering in his neck. She wasn't just fainting, her breaths were uneven, too fast, like she was trying to pull in air that refused to come. He couldn't sit there, he couldn't pretend she wasn't dying inches away from people who were pretending nothing was happening. He stood up again, this time without hesitation, hands gripping the desk to steady himself as adrenaline surged. The proctor spun toward him, fury already twisting her face. "Sit down," she barked. "That is your final." Then the sound of Sophia's breathing hit a frightening pitch, a wet, desperate gasp that snapped something loose in him. In that instant, Jalen made a decision that didn't care about scholarships or consequences, or people who believed he didn't belong here. His body moved before he could talk himself out of it. The exam didn't matter, the rules didn't matter, she mattered. And with everyone watching but no one acting, Jalen took his first step toward her, one step that would blow up his entire life. Jalen reached Sophia before anyone else even decided which emotion they were supposed to have. The proctor lunged toward him like she was tackling a crime scene, but he dropped to his knees beside Sophia anyway, blocking her path without meaning to. Her breaths were shallow, stuttering, the kind of breaths that didn't seem connected to anything keeping her alive. Jalen's mind snapped into that survival mode he'd taught himself in quiet corners of the library, scrolling through first aid videos during lunch breaks because nobody else was going to take care of him if something went wrong. "Hey," he said softly, tapping her cheek, "come on, stay with me, don't make this a dramatic Thursday." The joke slipped out with a shaky smile, not because it was funny, but because panic made him cling to anything that sounded normal. Her eyes didn't even flutter. He swept her hair back, tilted her head, checked her airway, the movements practiced but shaking. Students stared with wide frozen eyes like they were watching a movie they weren't allowed to pause. The Crest Society whispered among themselves, not about her safety, about the spectacle. Jalen could hear their smug little murmurs like static at the back of his skull. The proctor grabbed his wrist harshly. "Step away, you're contaminating testing conditions," she shouted, voice cracking with rage instead of fear. "You're done, your exam is void, step away right now." But Jalen didn't move, he didn't even look at her. "She can't breathe," he said, voice low but firm. "Do you want me to wait for her to stop entirely before I help?" The proctor opened her mouth to yell again, but shock flickered across her face, shocked that he talked back, shocked that he wasn't breaking under the threat she'd used on hundreds of students before him. She grabbed his answer sheet instead, ripping it off his desk in a single violent swipe like that would snap him back into submission. "Invalid, effective immediately," she spat. The sound of paper tearing hit harder than it should have. Jalen felt it, of course he did, but it was like the pain slid down his body and fell onto the floor beside Sophia. He just pressed 2 fingers against her neck, checking her pulse. "Weak, too weak, come on Sophia," he murmured, adjusting her position, guiding her breathing, keeping his own panic locked behind clenched teeth. "You're not allowed to die in a math exam. That's illegal somewhere, I swear." For a moment nothing changed, then her breath steadied just enough to keep hope alive. A ripple of relief moved through the closest students, but they stayed glued to their seats, terrified to acknowledge what they'd just watched. Jalen glanced around, meeting eyes that immediately darted away. Not one person stood, not one person bent the rules, not one person risked even a single point on their precious exam. He finally looked up at the proctor. Her face was twisted with the kind of anger that came from losing control of a narrative she thought she owned. "You disobeyed direct instructions," she hissed. "You disrupted the examination. You assaulted a student by grabbing her without permission." Jalen stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "Assault," she was dying. "That is for the administration to decide," she snapped. "You are finished here." He didn't get to respond. Two campus officers stepped into the doorway at that exact moment, radios buzzing, eyes scanning the room like they'd been summoned for a hostage situation. The proctor pointed straight at him. "Remove him." Jalen lifted his hand slowly, breath shaking, not from fear but from disbelief. He had done the right thing, the human thing, and somehow it was already mutating into something ugly in the eyes of the people who ran this place. He stood up, the room spinning in a nauseating mix of fluorescent lights and betrayal. As the officers guided him toward the exit, Jalen glanced back one last time. Sophia lay still on the floor, pale, surrounded by people who didn't know her but would have sworn she was fine if it kept their exam scores safe. And somehow, in the middle of all of it, in the wreckage of torn paper and ruined futures, Jalen felt something solid rise inside him. If this was the price of choosing to be a person over being a machine, then so be it. The consequences hadn't even started yet, but the fall had already begun. The hallway outside the exam room felt colder than it should have, the kind of cold that settles in when you realize the world isn't just unfair, it's actively aiming at you. Jalen stood between the two campus officers while the door slammed shut behind them, muffling the panicked murmurs from inside. His hands were still trembling from the adrenaline of trying to keep Sophia alive, but the second the proctor emerged, her heels slicing through the silence, the mood shifted again. She didn't look shaken, she looked victorious. She held his torn exam paper like it was proof of a crime. "Jalen Cole," she announced sharply, as if reading a guilty verdict, "your exam has been voided due to intentional disruption of testing protocols. This goes on your record immediately." Jalen blinked at her, stunned. "I was saving her life," he said, voice raw. "You were saving chaos," she shot back, eyes narrowing, "and now you're responsible for creating it." Before he could respond, the front doors pushed open and the Crest Society filed out with that same slow practiced swagger. 7 elites who never walked anywhere, they glided. Their leader, a sharp-jawed guy with ice-blue eyes, crossed his arms as if settling in for a show. "So this is the guy who ruined the exam," he said loudly, making sure his voice carried. The others murmured in agreement, like a chorus trained in cruelty. Jalen exhaled, dread sinking deeper. This wasn't an accident, they were here for a reason. The tallest one stepped forward, plastering on a mock concerned face. "Look, we get it. Some people panic under pressure, but throwing off the whole room just so you could cheat. That's low, even for you." The pause wasn't an accident, it was an insult dressed as hesitation. Jalen stiffened. "I wasn't cheating." She couldn't breathe. "Sure," one of the girls in the group said, twirling her bracelet. "Funny how you're the only one who noticed that. Maybe because you were too busy creating a scene to hide your own answer sheet swaps." Another chimed in, and touching an unconscious girl without permission. "Dude, what is wrong with you?" The accusation dropped like a stone in water. Jalen felt the air leave his lungs. "I didn't touch her like that," he said, shaken. "I was helping." "Helping yourself," the blonde guy smirked, stepping right into his space. "You wanted the room in chaos, so you could cheat. Then you put your hands all over her to make it look noble." The proctor didn't defend him, she didn't even pretend to care about the truth. "The administration will be informed of all eyewitness statements," she declared. "And based on what I've heard, this is a clear case of misconduct and inappropriate physical contact." Eyewitness statements, from who? The Crest Society, the same people who treated ethics like a board game. Jalen swallowed hard, anger and fear mixing into something acidic. "You're twisting everything," he said quietly. "No," the leader corrected, "we're clarifying it." One of the campus officers stepped in. "Sir, we need you to stop talking and come with us." The tone wasn't hostile, worse, it was resigned, like they already believed everything said about him. Inside the exam hall, an ambulance siren began to fade into the distance. They were taking Sophia away. And Jalen wasn't allowed anywhere near to explain what really happened. He felt his future collapsing, not in one dramatic crash, but in slow, crushing increments. One accusation became two became a narrative, and once a narrative sticks, nobody cares about the part where you tell the truth. By the time they escorted him to the administrative office, Jalen finally understood the gravity of what had just happened. They weren't just voiding his exam, they weren't just punishing him for standing up. They were rewriting the entire story and casting him as the villain. And the worst part, Sophia was unconscious. She couldn't correct anything. She couldn't defend him. She couldn't even say he saved her life. For now Jalen stood alone, outnumbered, outpowered, and officially marked as the boy who crossed a line he never even approached. His fall had only just begun. When Jalen walked into the administration building, he still held on to this tiny ridiculous hope that someone, anyone would listen to reason. Maybe a dean would watch the security footage. Maybe they'd recognize that the Crest Society had twisted everything. Maybe someone would care that a student almost died. For 5 seconds, he believed the institution wouldn't destroy him without checking the facts. But the moment he sat down in that narrow office chair, staring at the panel of administrators who refused to look him in the eye, he realized hope wasn't even on the menu. The academic dean tapped her tablet, barely acknowledging his presence. "Mr. Cole," she began, tone flat and cold, "after reviewing eyewitness accounts and the proctor's report, we have decided to proceed with immediate disciplinary action." Everything inside Jalen froze. "Eyewitness accounts?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "You mean the 7 people actively lying about what happened?" The dean didn't flinch. "We have multiple statements confirming highly inappropriate contact with an unconscious student, intentional disruption of an exam environment, and possible premeditation." "Premedi, ma'am." Sophia couldn't breathe. Enough. The word hit like a slap. Another administrator slid an envelope across the table, as if handing him a parking ticket instead of detonating his life. "This is your formal notice of expulsion from Northbridge University, effective immediately." His ears rang, his chest tightened. It didn't feel real. Expelled, not suspended, not investigated, just gone, like he'd never belonged here in the first place. He stared at the letter, the bold black letters screaming up at him, and felt the floor tilt in slow, sickening motion. But the fall didn't stop there. Additionally, the dean continued, "Your scholarship has been revoked. Without active enrollment, you no longer qualify for student employment on campus." She said it like reading off a grocery list. Jalen blinked. "So, I'm fired too." "Your position was tied to your academic status," she replied, smoothly. "Security has already been instructed to escort you off all residential and academic premises within the hour." That was the moment something broke, quietly, silently, inside him. His entire existence here depended on those 3 things: school, job, housing. Losing one would have been catastrophic. Losing all 3 at once. It wasn't a punishment, it was an erasure. The university wasn't pushing him out, they were scrubbing him clean off the map. He stood when they told him to stand. He walked out when they told him to walk. 2 security guards followed him down the hallway, watching him like he might sprint toward a professor and beg for mercy. Students in the lobby stared at him, confused, whispering, piecing together rumors like children assembling a monster out of spare parts. Jalen kept his eyes forward. If he looked at a single face, he knew he'd crack right open. By the time he reached the janitorial office to return his uniform shirt, the supervisor didn't even pretend to hide the annoyance. "Man, what the hell did you pull?" he grumbled, yanking the ID badge from Jalen's hand. "They said you caused a damn riot in the exam hall. Now I've gotta rework all the shift schedules." "Unbelievable." Jalen inhaled slowly, trying to stay steady. "Someone almost died," he said. "I didn't." Yeah. The man waved off. "I don't care about your drama. You're off the roster. Go pack your stuff before they lock you out." Drama. That word stung harder than all the accusations combined. He headed to the old maintenance closet he sometimes slept in. His things fit into one small backpack: 2 shirts, a notebook, a pair of gloves and a sandwich he'd planned to eat after his shift. As he zipped the bag, his phone buzzed. A new email notification slid across the cracked screen. From Northbridge Communications, subject: Safety Protocol Incident, Student Misconduct. His stomach dropped. He opened it. The university had blasted a campus-wide memo describing him as a disruptive student who violated testing protocol, created an unsafe environment, and engaged in inappropriate physical contact with a classmate. No name mentioned, but everyone knew who had been dragged out of the exam hall minutes earlier. The email ended with a reminder: students are encouraged to report suspicious behavior to campus authorities immediately. Suspicious behavior. Him. The guy who'd done CPR on a girl who was turning blue. His phone buzzed again. "Mom, we got an email from the school." "Jalen, what is happening? Please call me." He sank against the wall, gripping his backpack like a life raft. His mother's voice message came next, cracking, panicked, terrified. Bills were already drowning them. Jalen was the only shot his family had to break the cycle. And now he was the problem they would have to survive. When he finally stepped outside, the campus looked the same as it always had: marble glass, sunlight spilling onto pathways designed for someone else's children. But everything about it felt hostile, like the buildings themselves were telling him he never should have tried to rise above the role they'd assigned him. In less than 3 hours, the school had dismantled his entire life. Education gone, income gone, reputation gone, connections gone, and the people who could have defended him. One was unconscious in a hospital. The rest were too scared or too privileged to care. Jalen walked out of Northbridge with a backpack, a ruined name, and the sinking realization that he hadn't just been punished, he'd been buried. Word about Jalen's expulsion spread through campus faster than the official email, carried by whispers, group chats, and the kind of shocked murmurs that ripple when something feels too wrong to ignore. Most students kept their heads down, telling themselves it wasn't their business, that the school knew what it was doing, that getting involved would only drag them into something messy. But not everyone was built like that. A small group, maybe 10 students total, had been in the exam hall, close enough to see the panic in Sophia's face, close enough to watch Jalen sprint toward her while everyone else sat frozen. They knew the truth, they knew what the Crest Society was doing, and they couldn't stand the silence anymore. It started with a single girl posting on the campus forum, "I saw Jalen save her. That's it, he didn't do anything wrong." Within minutes, others echoed her, timid but determined. A guy from the back row added, "The Crest kids are lying. He wasn't cheating. He kept her breathing until help came." More comments appeared, some shaky, some angry, all insisting someone needed to look at the footage, interview real witnesses, stop letting the elites rewrite reality. For a moment it felt like something might actually change. Then the university noticed. By noon, several students who had spoken publicly received academic integrity warnings, vague but threatening enough to make anyone sweat. A professor privately told one of them, "You don't want to be involved in this, trust me." Another student suddenly found their research grant under review. 2 more were called into meetings where administrators talked in circles about professionalism and risks to their future careers, which was code for "shut up or we'll make you regret it." But the group didn't back down, not right away. They met in the library, whispering fiercely between bookshelves, trying to figure out how to help Jalen. One of them even tried organizing a small protest, nothing dramatic, just a simple stand-in outside the administration building, demanding an investigation. They printed flyers, they talked to the student newspaper, they planned to chant his name so he wouldn't feel alone. The school didn't wait for any of that to happen. Security shut down their gathering before it even began, citing permit violations. The dean's office summoned every protest organizer individually, telling each of them a different warning: scholarship reviews, conduct reports, parental notification, probation. It didn't matter if the threats contradicted each other. The goal was pressure, not consistency. Parents of wealthy students got involved next. Not to help, but to crush things faster. One father called the university demanding to know why his daughter was risking her reputation defending some janitor. Another parent warned that if the school let this narrative continue, donations would dry up. By the end of the week, 4 students were placed on academic probation for disruptive behavior, 2 were suspended pending investigation, and the rest fell silent from fear. Their group chats died, Their posts were deleted, their voices evaporated under the weight of consequences. None of them were equipped to fight. And just like that, the uprising, small, brave, honest, was stomped flat before it even took its first real breath. Jalen watched all of this from the outside, scrolling on a borrowed phone, heart twisting every time he saw another name added to the list of students being punished. They had risked everything for him. And the school punished them faster than they even bothered punishing the people who lied about him. The worst part wasn't the fear. It wasn't the humiliation. It wasn't even the loneliness. It was the guilt. He sat behind the old maintenance shed that night, hood pulled over his head, staring at the lights of the campus that no longer belonged to him. He felt like his very existence was poison. Whoever came close to him ended up crushed by the same machinery grinding him down. He whispered into the cold air, not sure who he was talking to. Maybe God, maybe himself, maybe the universe that kept handing him battles he didn't ask for. I didn't want them to get hurt, he said softly. I never wanted that, but this world didn't care what he wanted. It had already decided what role he'd play, and as far as Northbridge was concerned, Jalen Cole wasn't just guilty, he was radioactive, the kind of boy you ruin to keep others in line. And the message was clear. Anyone who tried to stand with him would be buried next. Sophia woke to the sound of beeping, steady, mechanical, way too bright for her fogged-up brain to recognize at first. Her eyes fluttered open, catching the harsh hospital lights overhead, and for a moment she didn't know where she was, why her chest hurt, or why her throat felt like she'd been breathing through a straw. Then the memories crashed in all at once, the exam hall, the dizziness, the world tilting sideways. She gasped, panic spiking, and a nurse rushed over, holding her shoulders gently. Easy, sweetheart. You're all right. You passed out during an exam. You're safe now. But Sophia didn't care about safe. Her voice came out hoarse but urgent. Where's Jalen? The nurse blinked, surprised. Jalen, the guy who helped me, Sophia insisted, pushing herself upright. The nurse tried to ease her back down, but Sophia fought it. He was with me. He helped me breathe. Where is he? Another nurse exchanged a look, that careful look adults give when they know something the kid in front of them won't like. You should rest, she said softly. We can update you later. That answer told Sophia everything. Something was wrong, something big. She yanked the IV tape gently but firmly enough to disconnect herself. I need to find him. You can't just I can, she snapped, surprising even herself. The polite, quiet Sophia everyone knew was gone. This version had urgency clawing straight through her ribs. When her mother wasn't there, when no friends were in the room, the panic only sharpened. She grabbed her phone from the bedside table. Notifications flooded her lock screen, group chats exploding with drama, campus updates, frantic texts from classmates asking if she was alive. But the messages that hit her hardest were the ones mentioning Jalen. He got expelled. They said he touched her. Was he cheating? Campus security literally dragged him out. Sophia's heart stopped. None of that was real. None of that matched what she remembered. She remembered his hands steady on her shoulders, his voice trying to keep her awake, the way he tilted her head so she could breathe again. There was no fear in his touch, no hesitation, just pure terrified concern. She remembered his face hovering over hers, caring, focused, desperate to keep her alive. And now the school had turned that into something ugly. She pushed the covers aside and stood, legs wobbling, but determination anchoring her in place. She wasn't going to let false stories tear him apart. Not after he literally kept her breathing. A doctor stepped into the room right as she reached the doorway. Sophia, you need to rest. We still need to run. I need to find Jalen, she cut in. Right now, he frowned. Sophia, he's no longer on campus. There was an incident. He saved my life. She snapped, sharper than she'd ever spoken to an adult. He didn't do anything wrong. Whoever told you otherwise is lying. Silence hung thick in the room. The doctor hesitated. The nurse avoided eye contact. And Sophia realized in an instant that the lie wasn't small. It was systematic. It was coordinated, and it had already spread far beyond the exam hall. Her stomach twisted with anger, the kind of anger she wasn't used to. She'd grown up surrounded by controlled environments, controlled conversations, controlled emotions. But this was fire. She grabbed her hoodie, ignoring the doctor calling after her, and stepped out of the room with only one thought anchoring her every move. Jalen didn't deserve any of this. If anything, she owed her life to him. And while the entire campus was swallowing the Crest Society's version of events without question, she was the only person alive who could shut every lie down instantly. As she moved down the hallway, gripping the rails to steady herself, a conviction settled in her bones, heavy, fierce, impossible to shake. Jalen wasn't the villain. He was the only one who had chosen humanity over consequences. And now it was her turn to choose too. The war for the truth had already begun. Sophia just didn't know that her next step would shake the entire school and pull someone far more powerful into the fight. The hospital front doors slid open with a hydraulic hiss just as Sophia reached the lobby, still pale, still shaky, still running on adrenaline instead of oxygen. She was ready to bolt back to campus on pure determination alone, until the entire atmosphere of the lobby shifted in a way that made every nurse glance up at the same time. 3 black SUVs rolled to a stop outside. Not the soccer mom kind, the government convoy kind. The back door of the middle SUV opened, and a woman stepped out, heels hitting the pavement with a confidence that didn't need permission from the world around her. Helena Hartwell, CEO, Powerhouse. The kind of woman whose signature alone could change the stock market. She didn't walk into places made room for her. And Northbridge University, whether it knew it or not, was about to regret underestimating her daughter. Sophia froze halfway down the stairs, her breath catching for a completely different reason than before. "Mom?" Her voice cracked from disbelief more than weakness. Helena's eyes snapped to her instantly, sharp, assessing, terrified in the way only mothers who hide their terror for a living can be. She crossed the lobby in seconds, hands cupping Sophia's face, scanning her like she was inspecting damage after a natural disaster. "Baby, are you okay? They said you collapsed. Why wasn't I notified sooner? Who was responsible? What happened in that room?" Her voice wasn't loud, but everyone nearby flinched because somehow it still hit like thunder. Sophia grabbed her mother's wrist. "Mom, stop. Listen, we need to go to campus. Something happened to Jalen." Helena blinked. "Jalen?" Her tone sharpened immediately. "Who is Jalen?" "The guy who saved me." "Saved you from what?" "From dying," Sophia said, the words tumbling out harsh and fast. "And they kicked him out for it." That was the exact second Helena Hartwell's expression changed. Not anger, not shock, something colder. Like a switch flipped in her mind and every ounce of corporate warfare expertise locked into place. She turned to her security team with a calmness that made the air tighten. "Get the car. We're going to Northbridge, now." Sophia moved with her, still unsteady. "Mom, they won't listen to me. They won't even let me near the admin building. They're lying about him. They're about to learn they picked the wrong daughter to lie about." Helena cut in, voice smooth as ice. "Tell me everything on the way. Leave nothing out. Especially names." Sophia had never seen her mother like this. Not the polished CEO version for cameras. Not the composed boardroom strategist. This was something else. Something more dangerous. Helena Hartwell, the mother who had resources, rage, and a very personal reason to burn down whatever stood between her child and the truth. As they walked toward the SUVs, nurses whispered, staff stared, even the automatic doors seemed to open faster. Sophia's heart hammered, not from fear, but from the first spark of hope since she'd woken up. Because if there was one person alive who could go toe-to-toe with the Crest Society's power and Northbridge's corruption, it was Helena Hartwell, and the school had no idea she was coming. No idea that the girl they dismissed as some random student was the daughter of a woman who built empires with her bare hands. No idea they were about to face a storm they couldn't control, silence, or buy off. For the first time since the exam hall, Sophia allowed herself to breathe. Jalen wasn't alone anymore, and Northbridge University was about to learn what it meant to pick a fight with the wrong family. Northbridge University's administrative building had always radiated quiet authority, mahogany doors, spotless marble floors, and the kind of silence that told visitors to behave. But when Helena Hartwell stepped inside, that silence turned into something brittle. Conversations died, phones paused mid-air. Even the secretary at the front desk straightened like she'd suddenly remembered her spine. Helena didn't broadcast power. She carried it like gravity, and today she wasn't here for diplomacy. Sophia followed at her side, still pale but fueled by anger sharper than the IV needle she'd ripped out an hour earlier. She leaned close. "They're going to lie to you," she whispered. "They already deleted parts of the footage." Helena didn't slow. "If they deleted it," she said calmly, "someone else has a copy. Institutions like this are never as clean as they pretend to be." They pushed through the double doors into the boardroom without knocking. Every administrator inside froze as if the temperature had dropped 10 degrees. The dean stood up so fast her chair hit the wall behind her. "Mrs. Hartwell, we didn't know you were coming." "That's clear," Helena replied, taking the seat at the head of the table even though it wasn't offered. "If you had known, you wouldn't have made the mistake of punishing the wrong student." The dean swallowed hard. A couple of board members exchanged nervous glances. The proctor from the exam sat in the corner, arms crossed, pretending she wasn't sweating. Helena opened her bag and pulled out a notepad, not to take notes, but to remind everyone she didn't need them. "I want the full security footage from the exam hall, not the edited version you sent to Sophia's attending physician." The room went silent, not confused silent, caught silent. The dean forced a professional smile. "There must have been a misunderstanding. The camera system experienced technical issues during that exam session." Helena tilted her head. "Technical issues? Yes. A malfunction. Unfortunately, the footage cuts out at—" "Don't insult me," Helena said, cutting her off with a tone so sharp it made the proctor flinch. "You erased it because you knew it cleared Jalen Cole of every accusation you used to expel him." The proctor stood abruptly. "Mrs. Hartwell, your daughter was touched without consent during an exam and the student—" Helena's eyes snapped to her. "He kept her alive," the proctor faltered. We couldn't verify." "You could have," Helena said, leaning forward. "But verification wasn't the goal, was it? The goal was to protect certain families from scandal." Every administrator stiffened at the word families because that word in wealthy institutions didn't mean parents. It meant donors, board members, people who expected loyalty in exchange for zero accountability. The dean cleared her throat. "Mrs. Hartwell, we assure you, this matter is being handled with the highest level of profess." "No," Helena interrupted again, calm as a blade. "It's being handled like a cover-up. And you were foolish enough to assume no one would question it." Sophia stepped forward then, voice trembling but fierce. "Mom's right. Jalen saved me. I remember everything. He didn't do anything wrong." The room shifted again, this time panic-flavored. The dean hesitated. "Sophia, you were unconscious. High stress can alter perception." And Sophia slammed her hand on the table so hard even Helena blinked. "I wasn't hallucinating someone giving me oxygen. Stop pretending you know what happened in my own body better than I do." Helena placed a steadying hand over Sophia's but kept her eyes locked on the board. "You have one last opportunity to hand me the unedited footage," she said. "If you don't, we proceed with legal action, press involvement, and a state-level investigation into Northbridge's history of scholarship removals. I believe you've buried quite a few students over the years." One board member whispered, "She knows." Another muttered, "We're dead." The dean's facade cracked. Her voice dropped to a defensive whisper. "We acted in accordance with school policy." Helena's answer was almost gentle. "Then why are you trembling?" The proctor stood again, pointing a finger at Jalen's name on the report. "He broke the rules. He disrupted the exam. He made physical contact that saved my daughter's life." Helena repeated, this time with enough force to shake the windows. "And you punished him for having a conscience. That tells me exactly what kind of institution you're running." Sophia's grip tightened around her mother's arm. "Mom, don't stop. They don't care. They never cared." And Helena didn't stop. She stood, gathering her bag, movements deliberate. "You have until tomorrow morning to hand over the footage. If not, I will return, except next time, I won't come alone." The dean swallowed. "Who would you bring?" Helena smiled, a cold, devastating thing. "Every lawyer who terrifies you, every reporter you've avoided, and every donor who cares more about ethics than the Crest Society's comfort." No one breathed. Sophia followed her mother out of the room, adrenaline buzzing through her veins. As the doors closed, administrators erupted into whispers, fear shooting across the table like electricity. Because for the first time since the scandal started, Northbridge didn't feel in control. and for the first time in Jalen's life, someone powerful was fighting for him. The moment Helena and Sophia stepped out of the boardroom, the real fight began, quietly, strategically, and with a level of precision Northbridge had never been forced to face. Helena didn't waste a second. Still walking through the lobby, she was already on her phone, her tone calm but carrying that unmistakable edge that made grown executives freeze mid-sentence. "Activate the internal team," she said. "Full sweep. I want every digital footprint Northbridge has touched in the last 72 hours. Her assistant on the other end hesitated. "That's a large request." Helena stepped into the sunlight like she'd stepped onto a battlefield. "Then start running." By the time they reached the SUVs, 3 lawyers were already waiting on standby. They didn't look like courtroom attorneys, they looked like the type hired when you want answers nobody wants to give. One handed Helena a folder thick enough to be its own textbook. "We've pulled initial intel on Northbridge," he said. "Financial irregularities, donor influence patterns, scholarship drop-offs. You were right, there's a pattern." Sophia leaned over, eyes wide. "How long has this been happening?" The lawyer didn't blink. 40 years. Sophia's stomach twisted. Jalen wasn't the first victim, just the one who refused to let the system pretend he wasn't human. Helena closed the folder with a snap. "I want everything," she said. "I want the entire iceberg, not just the tip." Then came the hacker, though Helena preferred calling him an independent digital analyst. A scrawny guy in a hoodie stepped into the back seat of the SUV like he'd been summoned from the shadows. He didn't greet anyone. He simply pulled out his laptop and said, "Show me the timestamp of when the footage malfunctioned." Sophia loaded the proctor's report on her phone. The hacker raised an eyebrow, cracked his knuckles and dove in. His fingers flew with the kind of confidence that suggested he'd once hacked something much scarier than a university server. "Their camera system didn't malfunction," he said, "within minutes. The footage was manually deleted, and whoever did it wasn't subtle." Sophia leaned closer. "Can you recover it?" He smirked. "You don't delete things, you just hide them, and I like hide and seek." He kept typing while the SUV drove toward the Hartwell Hotel suite. Helena sometimes used as a war room, a place with floor-to-ceiling windows and enough security to make a senator blush. By the time they arrived, he had a trail. There were 2 deletion attempts, he announced. One by the exam proctor's device, and one by someone way higher up the chain. Sophia clenched her fists. The Crest Society. The hacker shrugged. Or their parents. Same difference. Helena paced in front of the glass windows, absorbing every detail. "Get me the fragments. Pieces, echoes, anything." He nodded, already working on it. Meanwhile, Sophia took a different path, one Helena hadn't assigned but knew was necessary. She went hunting for voices. The students who had been silenced, the ones who'd tried to defend Jalen and were punished for it. She found one sitting alone in the back corner of the library, staring at her probation slip. The girl jumped when Sophia approached. "I'm not talking about Jalen," she whispered. "They'll suspend me again." Sophia sat across from her. "They can suspend you," she said softly. "But they can't suspend the truth." The girl's eyes filled with helpless anger. "I saw everything. He saved you." "Then say it again," Sophia urged. "This time to someone who can protect you." One by one Sophia met them. 5 students, then 7, then 11. Their stories didn't just match. They overlapped. They collided. Some had lost scholarships. Some had been threatened with failing grades. Some had been told their futures would be in jeopardy if they kept asking questions. All of them believed Jalen's expulsion was just one example in a long line of buried cases. By evening, Helena's hotel suite had transformed into a full-scale command center. Lawyers sorting through files, the hacker piecing together corrupted video fragments, students giving recorded testimonies with their faces blurred, Sophia moving from person to person with a strength she didn't know she had. And in the middle of it all, Jalen's name kept coming up, quietly, reverently, like he was someone who deserved justice instead of destruction. Hours later, the hacker suddenly leaned back in his chair. "Got something." Everyone froze. Helena stepped behind him. "Show me." He hit play. The footage was glitchy, broken, missing frames, but there it was. Jalen kneeling beside Sophia, tilting her chin, keeping her airway open, checking her pulse, doing everything a trained medical responder would have done. No inappropriate contact. No cheating, no chaos. Just a terrified boy trying to save a girl who couldn't breathe. Sophia covered her mouth to keep from crying. Helena's jaw clenched so tightly her knuckles went white. But the hacker wasn't done. "There's more," he said, scrubbing forward. Another fragment loaded. This one catching the proctor yanking Jalen's exam away before shouting something not recorded in the official report. Another fragment captured the Crest Society whispering together, their faces smug, watching the scene with casual cruelty. Helena stared at the images like memorizing a target. "When can you restore the full 14 seconds? He cracked a smile. "Give me the night." Sophia felt a fire light inside her chest. Hope, yes, but also fury, the kind that didn't fade. "We're going to clear his name, Mom." Helena placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder, steady and unshakable. "No," she corrected, voice low and lethal. "We're going to expose the entire system that tried to destroy him." And just like that, the secret war, quiet, organized, unavoidable, was officially underway. Northbridge University had no idea that the empire it had built on silence, intimidation and buried truth was about to be ripped open from the inside. And Jalen Cole, somewhere out there in the cold, had no idea that an army was rising for him. By midnight the hotel suite felt electric. Screens glowing, papers scattered, voices hushed but urgent. Everyone was waiting on one thing. The missing 14 seconds that Northbridge had buried like radioactive waste, 14 seconds that could unravel every lie, every accusation, every smug whisper the Crest Society had used to crush Jalen. The hacker sat hunched over his laptop, headphones around his neck, fingers flying across the keyboard with the reckless confidence of someone chasing a digital ghost. Sophia paced behind him, arms folded tight, her nerves wound like a wire about to snap. Helena stood at the window staring out over the city lights, her expression unreadable, half warrior, half mother, fully loaded. At exactly 12:43 a.m., the hacker stopped typing, completely. His whole body went still. "Got it," he whispered. The room froze. He dragged a file into a folder, patched together the corrupted segments, and clicked play. The footage blinked onto the large wall monitor, grainy, flickering, but unmistakably real. It showed Jalen leaping from his desk, sliding across the aisle, dropping to his knees beside Sophia before her body even hit the ground. His hands moved with precision, clearing her airway, keeping her head stable, timing her breaths. He didn't look frantic. He looked focused, determined, terrified she might slip away if he hesitated even 1 second. Sophia felt her throat tighten. That was the face she remembered. Not the villain the school painted, not the liar they accused, not the troublemaker the Crest Society mocked. Just a boy trying to keep her alive while the entire room pretended they didn't see her dying. The footage continued. The proctor lunged toward him, screaming something unintelligible on the audio, but her expression wasn't concerned for Sophia. It was furious at Jalen. She ripped his exam paper away like it was a weapon she wanted to use against him. In the background, the Crest Society exchanged pleased looks, one nudging another with a smirk like he'd just witnessed karma. Except it wasn't karma, it was sabotage. Then the final frames hit, Jalen looking up at the room full of frozen classmates, eyes full of disbelief that no one else had moved. That flicker of betrayal. That moment of absolute, heartbreaking clarity. The screen went black. Sophia pressed a fist to her chest, her breath shaking. "That's it, that's the truth. That proves everything." The hacker exhaled. "Yeah, and I can enhance it more if needed." Helena didn't blink. "Send it to me. Secure file, triple encrypted." Already done. But Sophia wasn't done. She grabbed the laptop, dragging the playhead back, watching the scene again with her jaw clenched. "We have to show people. We have to let everyone see what he actually did." Helena's voice was measured, calculating. "We will, strategically, at the right moment. Tomorrow is too late," Sophia insisted. "They're destroying him right now. They've blamed him for everything. Students are being punished for defending him. He's out there thinking no one cares." Helena turned fully toward her daughter. "Sophia, if we release it carelessly, the school will find a way to bury it. We do this clean. We do this loud. We do this so they can't twist it ever again." Before Sophia could argue, the hacker's phone buzzed, then buzzed again, and again. He frowned. Guys, I think someone leaked it." Sophia blinked. "Leaked what?" He rotated his screen. It was the video, already on the student forum, already screen recorded 4 times, already being reposted at lightning speed. Someone inside the movement had beaten them to it. Sophia's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. Helena stepped closer, scanning the comments flooding the page. This proves Jalen saved her. The Crest Society lied. Admin covered it up again. They ruined him, for nothing. I'm done staying silent. Share this everywhere. This is the truth. Within minutes the view count exploded. Within 10 minutes it hit every group chat, every dorm thread, every Discord server on campus. Within 15 minutes, students were storming into hallways, shoving phones into each other's faces. Within 20, someone screenshotted the glitchy frames and slapped the caption, "He saved her." They punished him. It spread like wildfire, fast, unstoppable, furious. The Crest Society realized what was happening too late. Their carefully crafted lies unraveled in seconds. Their confidence shattered as comments turned rabid, and Northbridge's internal server, it crashed. Sophia watched the chaos unfold with tears building in her eyes, not from fear, but from the first real surge of victory. Mom, it's happening. People see it. They finally see it. Helena placed a hand on her shoulder. Let them watch, she said softly. Let them decide who the villain is. Because in 14 seconds, just 14 seconds, Jalen Cole went from dangerous troublemaker to the boy who saved a life. And Northbridge University, it went from powerful to exposed. By sunrise, the video's explosion had become something Northbridge couldn't contain, even with all its polished PR machinery. Students were awake early, not because of class, but because every screen on campus, phones, tablets, dorm TVs, was replaying the same 14 seconds on loop. Jalen saving Sophia, the proctor ripping his exam, the Crest Society smirking like villains in a bad teen drama. The truth wasn't just visible, it was undeniable. And the anger it unleashed moved faster than the university could blink. By 8 a.m., the quad was flooded. Students gathered not in small groups but in crowds, hundreds forming circles of outrage, chanting Jalen's name like they were resurrecting someone who had been publicly executed. Bring him back rolled across the campus like thunder. Posters appeared out of nowhere. He saved her. Northbridge lied. Crest = corruption. Dorm windows blasted with homemade signs. Someone projected the recovered video onto the side of the library. Even faculty members, usually too scared to get involved, stood near the edges, shaken. Helena Hartwell watched the uprising from the tinted window of her SUV as it pulled into the campus entrance. Sophia sat beside her, hands trembling with anticipation, every nerve in her body lighting up at the sight of hundreds of students refusing to be silenced anymore. "They're fighting for him," she whispered. Helena nodded. "Good, now we finish it." The SUV rolled to a stop in front of the administration building. Camera crews were already waiting. Local news vans lined the sidewalk, reporters clustering with mics held high. Someone must have tipped them off about the scandal. Or maybe the story became too big to hide within a campus bubble. Either way, Helena stepped out like a general arriving at the front lines. The crowd surged, phones raised, whispers exploding into shouts. "That's Sophia's mom, the CEO. She's the one taking on the school. Oh, they're done." Helena didn't speak to the cameras yet. She walked straight through the chaos, her heels hitting the pavement like countdown ticks. Sophia followed, every student parting around her as if she carried a gravity all her own. They moved up the building steps and stopped at the doors right where the truth needed to be spoken. A university spokesperson tried blocking them. "Mrs. Hartwell, we're handling this internally. A press conference isn't necessary." Helena handed him a USB drive like dropping a pin on a map. "This contains the original footage. You'll want to watch it before you embarrass yourself any further." Reporters heard that. They went feral. Microphones shot forward. Cameras flashed. Questions fired from every angle. Did the school falsify records? Is it true Jalen Cole was expelled without investigation? Was the proctor acting under instructions from the Crest Society? Did Northbridge cover up misconduct? Helena raised a hand, and the entire crowd went silent in seconds. "Today," she said, voice amplified not by microphone but by sheer presence, "we are here because a student was punished for doing the right thing. because others were silenced for telling the truth, because corruption has been allowed to rot the foundation of an institution that claims to shape future leaders. Her gaze cut through the cameras. "Allow me to introduce what really happened." She nodded at the hacker, who stood ready with a laptop hooked to a portable projector. The screen lit up against the wall. The 14 seconds played. The crowd erupted. Gasps, outrage, shouts, curses. It was chaos, but righteous chaos. Every lie the school had built shattered like cheap glass. Then Helena dropped the hammer. "This footage was hidden," she said, "deleted by individuals who feared accountability. My daughter nearly died in that classroom. Jalen Cole saved her life, and instead of being honored, he was expelled, shamed and stripped of everything. This ends today." The proctor was dragged forward by reporters like bait in a shark tank. She stuttered excuses. She tried blaming technical errors. She pointed at the Crest Society as if they'd forced her hand. But students recorded every word. Faculty watched from the windows in disbelief. And the university president finally stumbled outside, tie crooked, sweating through his shirt, clearly realizing the fire was already out of control. "Mrs. Hartwell," he said, trying for authority but landing somewhere near a panic choke, "let's discuss this privately." "That's the problem," Helena replied. "Too much has been handled privately." Sophia stepped forward then, voice steady despite her shaking hands. "He didn't just save me, he saved the whole room from watching someone die. And you punished him for it because you didn't want to upset wealthy families." The president faltered. Cameras zoomed in. Students leaned forward. It was a public execution of lies. Sophia turned toward the crowd. "Jalen deserves justice. The students you silenced deserve justice. And this school deserves to face every consequence it tried to hide." Helena's lawyers stepped up behind her, intimidating immovable shadows. "We are filing for reinstatement," the lead attorney announced. "Full scholarship restoration, a public apology, and immediate disciplinary action against all staff and students who contributed to the falsification of events." The president's face crumpled. We can review." "No," Helena said, cutting him in half with a word. "You can agree." The pressure became too much. Reporters shouting, students chanting, faculty stepping forward, lawyers circling, cameras streaming live, and finally publicly, under the weight of an entire revolt, the president folded. "We acknowledge the investigation was handled improperly," he stammered. "We will reinstate Jalen Cole immediately. Full scholarship, retroactive clearing of any misconduct, and we will launch a separate investigation into the Crest Society's influence." The crowd exploded. The sound shook the air. Crest Society members tried to flee through the side door but reporters chased them. Students booed. One girl threw a smoothie at their leader. It was not his best moment. And just when the noise reached its peak, Helena delivered the finishing line, spoken not to the cameras but to the institution itself. "Next time you decide to bury a student, make sure he isn't the reason someone is still alive." Justice wasn't just served, it erupted, and Northbridge University was never going to look the same again. "All right, the final stretch." Jalen stepped back onto campus like someone waking up inside a dream they'd been forced to abandon. The sun was warm, the marble floors still impossibly shiny, and the students, hundreds of them, were gathered in the quad, facing the lecture hall he'd once cleaned before dawn. But this time they weren't looking through him. They were waiting for him, and when he appeared, a wave rippled through the crowd so powerful it felt like the whole campus took a collective breath. Then they stood, all of them, every row, every corner, every balcony, phones in the air, voices rising, people clapping, cheering, shouting his name like they were returning something that had been stolen from him. Jalen froze at the edge of the steps, overwhelmed. "Okay," he muttered under his breath, trying to smile through the stun. "This is definitely not how janitors usually clock in." A few students near the front burst out laughing. Their laughter spread like sparks catching on dry grass. It felt real, it felt freeing, it felt like the weight the school placed on him was finally sliding off his shoulders. As he walked toward the lecture hall, the same one where his life had detonated, Sophia moved through the crowd to meet him. There were bruises under her eyes from the collapse, but they softened when she saw him. "You came back," she said, breathless. "I mean," Jalen shrugged. "Didn't exactly have the budget for a dramatic escape to Mexico." Sophia laughed, shaking her head. You really can't help being you, can you? Not unless there's a tutorial out there, he joked. And even then I'd probably fail step 1. Behind her, Helena Hartwell stood with folded arms, watching Jalen with the stern intensity of someone who had decided he was now officially someone under her protection. The kind of protection you don't argue with if you want to keep your skeleton intact. The university president approached next, slowly, cautiously, like a man delivering an apology to the wronged son of a hurricane. "Mr. Cole," he said, offering a stiff handshake on behalf of Northbridge University. "We deeply regret," Jalen interrupted gently, shaking his head. "Just fix what broke," he said. Not angry, not dramatic, just honest. It was enough to make the president flinch. Inside the lecture hall, Jalen sat down in his usual seat, the back row by the window. The same spot he'd once claimed as a quiet refuge. Except today, the seat felt different. It didn't feel like something he was borrowing. It felt like something finally returned to him. Students filled in, whispering, smiling, nodding at him. Not with pity, with respect, with gratitude, because even though they hadn't moved during that exam, they knew who the real hero had been. As the professor walked in, he paused at the sight of Jalen. "Good to have you back, Mr. Cole," he said, simply. The class murmured approval. No theatrics, just acknowledgement, and it meant everything. Later that afternoon, the university held a press event announcing new reforms, a full investigation into scholarship manipulation, the removal of the Crest Society's privileges, mandatory accountability reviews for proctors and administrators, a public apology to Jalen and his family. But the most unexpected announcement came from Helena herself, stepping forward with Sophia at her side. "I am establishing the Jalen Cole Educational Justice Foundation," she declared. "A fund dedicated to protecting students who are targeted, silenced, or sabotaged by the institutions meant to uplift them." The crowd erupted. Jalen stared wide-eyed. "Wait, my name is on that." Sophia nudged him. "Welcome to being a symbol." "Yeah, can I return it? Maybe get store credit?" "Nope. You're stuck with it." His phone buzzed with messages, his mother crying with joy, his little brother shouting about how Jalen was now famous. People he hadn't heard from in years telling him they were proud. It was surreal, overwhelming, but warm in a way life had rarely been for him. That evening, when the campus quieted down and the sky turned gold, Sophia found Jalen sitting under the old oak tree behind the science building, his thinking spot. She sat beside him, knees touching. For a moment they didn't speak, they just breathed in the aftermath of everything. "You know," Sophia said softly, "you saved me, but you also saved everyone who needed someone to fight back." Jalen lowered his eyes. "I didn't fight, I just refused to walk away. That's what fighting is." He smiled, letting the moment sink in. "You ready to actually be a student again?" she asked. Jalen leaned back, hands behind his head. "As long as I don't have to clean the classroom before class. Deal." And as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, Jalen Cole realized something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not just safety, not just victory, but purpose. Real, tangible purpose. Because they had tried to erase him. They had tried to break him. They had tried to turn him into a warning. But instead, he became a legacy. And the story of Jalen Cole, the janitor who stood up, the student who was framed, the boy who saved a life, and the symbol who changed a university, was only just beginning. "They cut my exam," Jalen said once, half joking, half truth, "but they couldn't cut the reason I stood up."